Hi, I'm Peter Krull, and we are back for another episode of Dollars and Change, the expert's guide to sustainable and responsible investing. We are at the U.S. SIF conference, the Sustainable Investment Forum here in Chicago, and I'm sitting with my friend Erin Gray, who is with Green Century Funds. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
I've known Erin for several years, and she does some really good work with Green Century. I've known her boss, Leslie Samuel Rich, for years. They are one of the fund families that really gets it. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about Erin, and then we'll get a little bit into Green Century, and we'll get into some of the deeper questions.
Sounds great. So I have been in the space as long as I've been at Green Century, which is my first job out of graduate school.
Wow.
Many moons ago. So I was simply looking for a way to combine my interests in kind of the business, finance, investment world with my environmental interests. And I had gone back to graduate school, done a business and environment program, found Green Century. And, as after a couple years, all of my classmates were moving on to their second or their third job. So every few years I would look around and say, oh, what should I be doing now? And I'd look at the financial services space and say, nope, and come back to Green Century every time. So for me, it's really been a home for great place to explore my interests in these two areas. And then I feel like I've kind of grown up with the industry.
Right.
It's really expanded over this time period.
I don't want to age you, but how long have you been with Green Century?
We're going on 22 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fabulous, because we're on our 20th anniversary at Earth Equity right now.
Congratulations.
So, thank you.
That's amazing.
So we've sort of grown up in this together, really seen the evolution and all the changes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you'd mentioned my boss, Leslie Samuel. She came on, I want to say in 2012.
Okay.
So she really rode the fossil fuel-free movement as well. So she hit a great inflection point. And it's really exciting to see this whole growth in our industry.
So let's talk about Green Century a little bit, because Green Century is a bit of an aberration, if you will, in terms of its ownership structure, but it's always had a sustainable and green bent to it.
Yeah. So the origin and story of Green Century was back in the late 80s, early 90s. This group of nonprofits called the Public Interest Research Groups had all these members across the country. They're state-based organizations, so there's a MassPIRG, and I'm in Washington State, so a WashPIRG. About 30 of these organizations around the country, and they had all these members who cared about social and environmental issues. But at the time, there weren't that many ways to invest that aligned with those values. So, some nonprofits open up a coffee shop as a revenue stream.
Right.
And this group decided, let's open up a mutual fund family. And,
that makes sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. Who doesn't do that every day? So it's really been a great fit. A big part of what we do, we might chat about, is our advocacy work.
Right.
And that's really flowing from the DNA of our owners who run environmental and public health advocacy campaigns as well.
Absolutely. Let's talk first before that's really the core of what I want to talk about with you is that. But let's talk about these last 20 years. Let's talk about the evolution. Yeah. When I started, it was socially responsible investing, and then we've had a bunch of other acronyms and everything else that have happened over that time.
Yeah.
What's your view on the evolution of our industry?
Well, it's interesting. We had a great speaker at the conference yesterday, John Hale, who said, we have grown up, we're robust, but we still don't know what to call ourselves.
Right.
So this kind of complexity and confusion about our name, unfortunately, still exists.
Right.
You'd mentioned some. There's socially conscious, ethical investing, green investing, impact investing, SRI, ESG, all these acronyms. And for us, it's kind of regardless of what we call ourselves, we're just trying to bring in additional research, data points, analysis that incorporates environmental as well as social and governance factors. That's that ESG acronym. But I think folks don't realize, we're keeping all the traditional financial analysis in there.
Right.
We're just adding on to it, so it's more robust.
I like to call it enhanced due diligence.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yep, exactly.
Because at the end of the day, you're a fiduciary, we're a fiduciary. The most important thing we can do is have as much information as possible so we can make smart decisions.
Exactly. Who doesn't want that?
Who doesn't want that? Well, I can tell you some people who don't want that, but it's only because they don't understand it at the end of the day. And so that's a big part of our job, I think,
I agree.
is education. So how does Green Century work in terms of trying to educate? I know you guys put a lot of pieces out on that.
Yeah, exactly. We do actually try to distill it to kind of the core of the environmental change that we're trying to affect. So we call them our two-pagers, just really boiling down the essentials of the work that we do. We work on a variety of environmental campaigns. And now we're trying to put out two-pagers on each specific issue. So we work on the right to repair our products and plastic pollution, protecting tropical forests and stopping deforestation. So really trying to show the broad overview through things like a top 10 list of, the advocacy victories that we've had over the year, but then by issue area, kind of dig in and provide nuggets of information that we hope are digestible to financial advisors like yourselves, and maybe you'll have the bandwidth to remember 2 or 3 stories to share with a client, and if they can walk away saying, I can't imagine that a client's going to remember the quarterly performance on any given quarter or after a meeting with an advisor, but maybe they will remember, we helped Coca-Cola reduce their amount of plastic waste, things like that.
Well, it's about stories, right?
Exactly.
And if we can come up with good stories that clients remember and clients understand, or advisors remember and then they understand, it's a lot more impactful than, your return was 10.47%. That a year from now somebody isn't going to remember.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
All right. So we stuck our toe into shareholder advocacy. Let's just jump into the pool and talk about it. Let's start by just defining it from your perspective. What is shareholder advocacy?
Sure. So it's simply the idea of working with companies to improve their environmental performance. For us, we take this environmental lens and perspective.
Right. Although I think you also do social, like some other social, not just environment, right?
It's mainly environment.
Okay.
That touches,
it touches everything.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
You're right. Sorry.
You can't just put a box on it.
Right.
But we come first from that environmental perspective.
Gotcha.
And, I think other investors bring other issues to the table as well, but this is kind of the lens we approach it from.
And so let's dive in. What are the issues that you're regularly working on?
Yeah.
And then let's hit a couple specific examples of that.
Sure. So each year, the advocacy season kind of follows a school year calendar.
Okay.
So the summer is a bit of a break, quote unquote. I don't think our advocates would agree with that, description. But it's a time for us to take a step back from working with companies to say, what are the most pressing environmental issues that we face? You can imagine there are things like climate change, deforestation, clean air, clean water, trying to reduce waste, pollution, those sorts of things. And then we say, where can we engage with companies to make meaningful progress on these issues? Some we might determine more have a policy or legislative angle, and our nonprofit owners often work from that angle. But we try to say, okay, let's look at the companies that have passed the screens to get into our portfolio. Who are the leaders in these industries on the issues of concern that we care about? Who are the laggards? And where can we help companies improve? Kind of no matter where they are along that spectrum.
That was what I was going to ask. Do you sort of have a benchmark for how much impact you want to have on each particular issue?
Not from when we go into an issue. We're really trying to make that incremental change all across the spectrum. So, way back when we worked with Whole Foods, they were, considered a really good company at the time, but we worked with them to eliminate bisphenol A or BPA, starting with, kind of kids' sippy cups that they were selling that had that plastic that was leaching into product, and then expanded that across all of the plastics entering their store.
Oh, that's great.
So even those companies that we, just think right off the bat, they're doing really well, we often find there's room for improvement there.
Yeah, because it's not a black and white thing. It's all gray.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And so, give me an example of, there was one right there. So give me some other examples of something you're proud of.
Yeah, sure. So plastic pollution is an issue that we are really trying to address. The premise of this campaign is nothing that we use for a few minutes should threaten human and animal health for hundreds of years.
Right.
And we find that with the rise of single-use plastics in particular, we use it for a second, we throw it out.
Right.
And that stays in the environment, again, unfortunately, for hundreds of years. So companies are supplying this through products, through packaging. So because plastics are so prevalent, we've worked across a number of industries, from toy companies, hotel chains, beverage, food companies.
And just as an example, we're at a hotel. The water that they provide for us in the rooms here, we have glass, and then it's in a glass bottle that's sitting next to us here. And so that's just one small step that instead of having a bunch of plastic bottles, which I think we've all seen at hotels at conferences before.
Yep.
I think that ACCOR is a company that is the parent to this hotel here, Swiss hotel we're at. They get it. They're actually one of the companies that we invest in. So,
oh, fantastic. Yeah, along those lines, we've worked this season with Choice Hotels, Hilton, and Marriott to get rid of the single-use plastics, as you said, the small bottles of shampoo, lotion, conditioner that we often find in hotel rooms, and transitioning to those bulk amenities.
Right.
So they can be refillable. You don't have to, throw away that plastic.
Over and over and over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Give me another example. It's really important to show impact. And again, this is all about stories. So, we have a lot of advisors that watch the podcast, and so giving them ammunition so that way when they're sitting with a client or prospective client, allowing them to say, oh, you know what? Here's an example of some impact that you have the potential to have.
Yeah, exactly. So as investors, we've got a lot of tools to engage with companies. Coca-Cola was a really interesting example.
Yeah.
They made it into our portfolio because looking at the environmental, social, and governance criteria, they were better than their peers.
Okay.
So we try to avoid the worst companies, invest in the better companies. There's no 100% perfect sustainable company out there.
Right.
So, people might question why Coca-Cola has made it into the portfolio. They could be slightly better than their peers, but we see room for improvement all over the place. Turns out Coca-Cola is among the world's largest users of plastic resin.
Okay.
And our shareholder advocates was on a quarterly call with the company and realized they had no management plan to even look at what they were doing in terms of plastic use.
When was this?
This was 2020 through 2021 shareholder advocacy season, so not that long ago.
That just blows my mind. That just 3-4 years ago, that they still didn't have a plastic action plan.
Exactly, and we have all been to beaches and parks.
My wife's has seen the gyre in the Pacific Ocean. She said it was unbelievable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's estimated that 11 million metric tons of plastic waste enter our waterways each year.
Yeah.
And you can imagine there's a lot of Coke bottles among those.
Right.
So we approached the company. We ended up filing a shareholder resolution, which is a way to get an area of concern on a company's proxy ballot for all of the company's shareholders to vote on. That often brings the company back to the negotiating table to say, what are you looking for? How can we make positive change here? So the company agreed to reduce their use of new plastic by 3 million metric tons by 2025. So over that time period, that equated to about 200,000 bottles per minute.
Wow.
So
and what percentage of their overall plastic use was that?
I do not know.
Okay.
But I have to imagine actually it's relatively small.
That was my thought on it.
Yeah. So that seems like 200,000 bottles per minute does significantly add up.
When you think from a global scale?
Completely.
Yeah.
So it was a good first step for the company. And what we do is that now we have a concrete, real-world, measurable commitment from the company,
right,
time-bound, so that we can go back and make sure that they are implementing in that time frame. And it allows us to say, okay, that's a great first step. what can we do?
What's next?
More.
Yeah.
And so we were able to re-engage with the company and say, okay, you're trying to reduce your use of new plastic. In order to make a further dent in this issue, what are you doing in terms of refillable and reusable bottles? You just mentioned our, glasses here. We've got glass water bottles here at the conference, which is amazing.
Yeah.
These can be reused multiple times.
Over and over and over again.
And growing up, I don't know if
I was going to say the same thing. Growing up, we used to have glass bottles. There was no plastic growing up.
Exactly.
And they had a nickel or a dime a return on them.
Completely.
That just seems like a no-brainer to me.
And the logos were faded. You knew we weren't the first ones using this bottle, and then we would return them, and they'd go through the system and get cleaned and reused.
That is truly circular economy at that point.
Exactly. But as plastics arose, they became cheaper, lighter to transport.
That's a big deal, is the transportation costs.
Completely.
Yeah.
And so that infrastructure in the U.S. at least got dismantled. And so we said, what are you thinking about in terms of, being able to reinstall some of this infrastructure? Turns out they're currently about 11 to 16% of Coca-Cola's global beverage distribution is through refillable and reusable bottles.
That's more than I would have guessed.
Yeah, and it's currently in place in parts of Latin America, parts of Africa. So
yeah, because you can get like Mexican Cokes, I think they're called, right? With that don't have high fructose corn syrup, but actually have cane sugar in them.
Exactly.
We used to get
slightly different.
Yeah, we used to get those when we went to Costa Rica all the time. That was so much better than the stuff you serve here. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So we were able to engage with the company, and they committed to source or to have 25% of their global beverage distribution using refillable or reusable bottles by 2030.
Okay.
So that's going to be a significant capital investment for the company to reach that bar. So that was a great kind of follow-on step of a company going deeper and recognizing that this is an area of risk and opportunity for them.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, filing a shareholder resolution versus direct engagement.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about that decision-making process. How do you go to a company? At what point do you say, you know what, you're not playing nice, we're going to file a shareholder resolution? How does that whole process work?
Yeah, well, it is different company by company. We always approach a company with a dialogue first. Just reach out, send a letter, and we engage with, anything from folks at companies from high-level management executives, maybe board members, through, legal or IR folks, investor relation folks, or we might be put in touch with sustainability or supply chain experts at a company, depending on the issue and who is, the most appropriate person to engage with. We always start there. Often companies are open to the conversation. Okay. They might this might be an issue that they have been wanting to work on and wanting to learn more. And it's always a two-way street. In this kind of climate that we're in now, there's a term in our industry called greenwashing, where we used to think companies were saying, oh, we're doing all this great stuff, but if you looked under the hood, it might not be as robust as we had hoped.
Absolutely.
There's a new term out now called green hushing, where companies might be doing good work, but given the political climate or cultural issues going on now, they might not want to be kind of out loud and proud about what they're doing in some of the environmental areas. So it's an opportunity for them to educate us, for us to educate them on our areas of concern. And then depending on how those conversations go, they may make meaningful change or agree to learn from other leaders in the industry and kind of set some commitments in place, between us.
I just want to comment. I think it's sad that this whole green hushing thing that but obviously we've seen these campaigns with, I think, Bud Light or one of those where they had a trans ad or a LGBTQ plus ad, and they took it on the chin for that. And it's, I don't know, if you're doing something that's good, you should be rewarded, not punished for it. But anyway, that's...
We thoroughly agree with that. And we recognize that companies are feeling some of this backlash and, maybe they don't want to get distracted and just continue to do their good work.
Yeah, I understand. I understand that as well. So
Yep.
it's it's a tough world we're in right now. So
Yeah, exactly. And so, depending on that conversation, that's the first and best outcome we're looking for that a company is willing to make.
yes, we will
Change.
work with you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's not always the case, as you can imagine. And so, some companies don't really respond to our outreach. And then we have a process where we can file something called a shareholder resolution
Right.
or a shareholder proposal. And this is an item, no more than 500 words that we submit through the SEC process that could get put on a company's proxy ballot for all of the company's shareholders to vote on at their annual meeting.
Right.
So that often is enough of an impetus for the companies to come back to us. This is a pretty, high profile public way to get their attention. Management often doesn't want these issues discussed amongst all of their shareholders and their board at the annual meeting. So oftentimes companies will come back to us and try to learn more about what other companies are doing in the industry, ways that they can improve, look at the specific criteria that we are looking for. It's really up to the investor what your withdrawal criteria is. And as an investor, you can withdraw that if the company does agree to make meaningful change. And we always look for kind of that real world, concrete, measurable change with that time bound commitment.
Right.
So it's, they sign a commitment and it's the trust but verify.
Right.
We hope and they are agreeing to fulfill a commitment, but, it's up to us to make sure that gets implemented.
So there have been some lawsuits including specifically ExxonMobil of late. And what is you guys' take on their pushback on shareholder resolutions?
It was interesting because the shareholder who filed that resolution ended up withdrawing it.
Right.
And the company was still going forward with their lawsuit, and it was just dismissed, I believe, last week.
It was, yeah.
By the judge. So the company didn't then say, okay, the shareholder has backed down, we're okay with this. It seems to me a bit of an intimidation tactic, trying to have a chilling effect on, you want to propose a shareholder resolution? Well, we're going to sue you. And that's a big, expensive, long, drawn-out process that takes an investor's attention and time and energy away from trying to make progress on these key issues.
Yeah. We're Exxon. How dare you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've actually, I've been to a few annual meetings. I've presented one shareholder proposal, and it was at Chevron.
Oh.
And it was fascinating. It had a weird kind of paramilitary feel to it. There were a weird number of security guards there, lots of guns in sight.
Interesting.
The meeting started with the corporate secretary talking about what we should all do if an earthquake happens while we're having this meeting. So I've never attended a meeting that started with, earthquake protocol. And then, proceeded to have the full annual meeting. And the company had a lot of, highly polished videos.
Right.
And we were in a big auditorium. And when it came time for the shareholders to present our resolutions, we knew we had a 2-minute limit. Mm-hmm. And so the entire screen goes blank, and they put a countdown clock on. And it was green for the first minute and a half, orange for the next 20 seconds, red for the last 10 seconds. And then they would cut the mic if you were at the podium still speaking after the 2-minute limit. So
wow.
That was a very...
So you had to practice your 2 minutes.
Completely.
Yeah.
I was speaking very quickly.
That's sort of the antithesis of what the idea of shareholder is. Now I understand, Chevron made some enemies in South America with some of their practices down there. So I understand maybe the security a little bit. Yeah. But it feels a bit overkill to me.
Completely. Yeah, but I've been to a couple other annual meetings. One was Costco, and it had a new store opening feel to it. So entirely different. Yeah. Starbucks was another one I went to, and they were passing around food samples of new items they were hoping.
And everybody was highly caffeinated, probably.
Exactly. It was fantastic. So very different corporate energy, feel, culture comes across, I think, in these interactions as well.
Well, from what I understand, the Berkshire Hathaway ones are really sort of celebrations, and the Walmart ones are really sort of celebrations.
Yep.
So,
And the Starbucks one had a concert part of it. Apparently, they bring in a musician each year. So, yeah, we had, can't remember our artist.
so everybody gets the same final question.
Great.
And I'll preface it by saying, we see the impacts of climate change all around us. I was in New York last week, and it was well into the 90s in June. But hurricanes are getting more, storms are getting more intense in general. Fires, drought, everything is happening.
Yeah.
In light of all of that evidence, what gives you hope?
That's a fantastic question. And it's actually meeting with folks in our industry like you and here at this conference who are working every day to make progress on this issue. I know it's daunting. Sometimes I actually try to not look at the big picture too much because it is concerning down to my very soul. But we have great speakers here. Yesterday, Sean Casten, who's part of the Congressional Sustainable Investment Caucus, spoke. And he said in the last year, his quote was, we generated more energy from non-hydro renewables, so wind and solar, than we did from coal. And this is becoming a purely economic decision now. These sources of energy are cheaper than coal and some of our traditional sources. So,
Just say it, dirty sources.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we whitewash it by saying traditional, but it's dirty energy at the end of the day.
Exactly. And, this is going to become an economic decision.
Yes.
And I think people aren't going to pay more just out of spite. So I really think, bringing in the finance and investment piece of it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
He talked about offshore wind projects in Northern Europe are going to flood them with cheap energy.
Yep.
And, our nonprofit owners work on campaigns like 100% renewable energy. And now I think it's over a dozen states have committed to that. So kind of no matter what is happening at the federal level, right now it's great at the federal level, but we know that that's not always the case.
That can change, yes.
And we're in an election year, so we want to be really honest about that. But they've also supported, offshore wind projects. So I think projects like that, we all understand we need them, and just trying to make sure we can support industries like that really does give me hope.
Excellent. Erin Gray, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Wonderful to be with you.
And thank you for paying attention and hanging out with us for a little while here. I want to remind everybody to make sure you like the episode and that you follow us on YouTube and all your social media channels. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.